Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of art. It's the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson, coming to you from the 40 West Arts District here in Lakewood, Colorado. And joining me from the bowels of his art cave, you know him as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world. Heavyweight podcaster of the West, Wes Brown.
Hey, Todd, how you doing, buddy? I'm definitely a heavyweight podcaster. I think that's a record I've been building on every year or two because I think I'm getting bigger and bigger.
You're at fighting weight now. Like you haven't been doing any kind of competitions or contests. And I figure if I start pushing this, you know, with the weather getting nice, maybe we can get you into some kind of like, I don't know, sparring match.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. I've still got my eye on car jiu-jitsu. So
jiu-jitsu. But they also do do they still do the Tough Man contest up at Sturgis every year? Oh,
I'm sure they do during the rally. Yeah, I'm sure it's a big deal.
Dude, that has your name all over it.
Oh, we'll see about that.
Huh? Is it like bare knuckles?
I've never been, but probably. I mean, if it's a tough guy, it's got to be bare knuckle, right? You can't be wearing gloves. So my
wife was a ring girl. You probably know that story. Yeah, for the Tough Man contest one year.
Nice. Yep. Is that how you met her?
You were
in the ring and she was the ring girl? No? Okay.
No, sir. Not me. I don't like to get hit. I like this face the way it is. It's ugly as it is. I don't need anything else going on.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah.
Happy May Day, by the way.
Oh, it is. I even got a May basket. The first time in years. Yeah. One of my clients stopped at my office and gave me a little May basket. It sent me back to 6th grade when you used to hand out the May baskets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, all the young people are going, what is May Day?
Yeah. Nobody does that anymore. But I thought about it today. I was like, gosh darn it. Every year I actually think about it. I'm like, I should get some flowers. I remember growing up, my mom would always go buy flowers and then we would run around as kids and you know, you would put the May basket or a bouquet of flowers on the doorstep. You'd ring the bell and then you'd run away and they'd come out, you know, older women, neighbors that we had. And
nice.
Yeah, that's a fond memory that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I was blown away. I'm just sitting there and somebody come in and laid May basket on my desk and said it was from a client. I was like, oh, that's nice.
I feel like we should bring back that tradition.
There we go. There we go. Let's do it.
All right.
Well, all right. You ready to talk some art, Todd?
I am ready to talk some art.
All right. Let's do it.
Our guest this week hails from the beautiful state of Washington, and he carves and sculpts intricate, thought-provoking scenes that will blow your mind. You can check out his exquisite work at his website, featherfolio.com, and you can follow him on Instagram at featherfolio. Welcome to the program, Chris Maynard. Chris, how are you?
Well, thank you for having me.
We were over the moon that you were willing to talk with us. So thank you for spending your evening with us.
Absolutely.
You live in Washington State. Where in Washington State do you live?
I'm near Olympia, the capital.
Okay.
Just south of it in a little rural area.
And for those that aren't really familiar with Washington State, what is that like, that area that you live in?
Washington says it's the evergreen state, so it rains a lot. It's lovely. I grew up here. I was born near here and never really left.
Nice. I've seen pictures of, the Olympia State Park and just gorgeous as far as, the floral and everything presentation in the spring. It's really a gorgeous place.
Yeah, there's a wide variety of landscapes. It's really wet on one side where I live, and even wetter farther towards the coast. And then the mountains suck out all the water, and it's really dry on the other side.
Yeah, there's kind of a high elevation desert, or maybe it's just arid?
It's arid. I think the lowest is maybe 7 inches of rain a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And then on the coast, it's 150.
Holy smokes.
Quite a difference.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, no doubt.
So how far is the area near Olympia where you live to the coast?
50 miles.
Okay.
No, actually more like 70 miles.
So like a little over an hour drive to get
An hour
to,
drive. Yes.
yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So I assume since you grew up in that same area that you spent a lot of time outdoors. That seems like kind of the constant when you're talking about the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. That was our family. We hiked. We had a place right actually on the Quinault Reservation, right on the coast, and spent a lot of time there. And just actually, I grew up with three sisters who I wanted to get away from a lot. So I spent a lot of times in the woods by myself or with friends. So that was kind of the woods were my nurturing place.
Your place of solitude where you get away from it all for a little while.
Yes. Yes.
And so where did you fall in the pecking order of siblings?
Oh, I was top dog. I was the biggest brother.
Ah, that's where you are at too, right? You're top dog of three.
I'm always the top dog.
You are. You are. But you have two younger sisters.
I do.
I had to treat them kind of gently. I don't know if that was the same as you, but I learned how to be kind of a gentle person. So I wouldn't be the kind of person who would like get in a fight with Wes.
I think depending on the day and which sister you talk to, they might think I was a very nice brother, or they might think that I was here to torment them. And I did a lot of tormenting, I must admit.
Me too.
So from what I read, you actually come from a family of artists. Is that true?
Yes, it is. My grandfather was an artist. I'm not professionally, but my mother was really close with him and she became a professional artist. And my sister's an artist. And my father was a doctor. He was eye surgeon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Your mom was a Sumi artist. Is that right?
My mom, I found out on her deathbed that she was actually a professor. I didn't even know that for a short period of time in Georgia. Then she got married. And in those days, well, she quit her job and was a mom with 4 kids. But she always kept her art. She always kept doing art and making art and being involved in some way. And she ended up with the following. She taught at a college part-time and taught classes in her studio. And during her life, she did oils and she switched to watercolor and she finally switched to Sumi before she went blind.
Wow. And talk about the art of Sumi for those that don't know.
Sumi is a Japanese way, kind of like Chinese brush strokes, of capturing the essence of nature in as simple a brush strokes as you can.
Oh. Now, growing up, did you paint as well? Did you draw or anything like that?
We were always creative and I did a lot of everything, but I never really took it up as a profession until later in life. I've always done art and I've taught workshops and done sculpture and a lot of other things, but not professionally until my mother died. And then I said, what am I doing with my life? And switched from my job, which was negotiating flows on the Columbia River and other rivers around Washington that have dams. So how much water is going over the dams, how they manage that water.
So a water conservationist is
Yeah,
essentially?
hydrology. Yeah.
That's got to be pretty interesting, actually.
It was interesting, but not terribly creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fulfilling during your professional career before you pivoted?
Not as much as art. It wasn't as fulfilling as art. I liked the people I was working with, and sometimes I found it fairly fulfilling, but not a big passion of mine.
I want you to take a moment and talk about, if you can, kind of distill it down to what you do as an artist.
I take a real feather, usually shed feathers, so the birds might still be alive, and I will back them. I've developed a process of backing them so they don't fall apart when I carve them into bird themes. And what you see is like, well, it's a lot like a lot of art. It might be a little bit of deception. What you see is the feather, but they're backed. And we see feathers sometimes as delicate, but they're really made of the strongest of animal material. It's keratin, same as your fingernails or a bird's beak and a bird's claw and our hair. And it's the toughest of animal materials. So our idea of a feather being delicate is wrong. I think it's associated with a feather being light, but really they're light because they're structurally incredibly engineered so a bird can fly.
So I think that is the thought of a lot of people, right? That feathers are actually very frail, but in essence, they're very tough. What are some of the other things that people don't realize that a feather is or does outside of facilitating flight?
I am always learning new things about feathers. Just holding them in my hand and looking at them, especially with like a magnifying glass. The structure of the feathers, I could write a book about it, which wouldn't be very scientific, but just what I've observed. It's a lot to answer that question. A feather has a shaft, the main part of it's like a tree trunk. And then off that shaft comes branches, which are called barbs. And those barbs have other little branches. They have hooks. They hold together so the feather looks like it's one solid piece. But right where it comes out of the shaft, it's kind of like an I-beam or a J-beam, like a big steel beam, because they're thick. And then as they go out towards the edge of the feather, they're thinner and thinner and thinner.
That's fascinating. I never really give it much thought. I'm kind of like the average person. You look at them and you pick them up and they feel like really light. And I never thought about the structure of them. That's an amazing thing to like. I'm going to have to take a closer look and really observe.
But when you do, take the vein of the feathers, the part that looks like it's all together, and then there's downy part, but the vein looks like it's kind of one flat piece. And it's not really. It's made of a lot of little barbs and pieces, and they have hooks like Velcro on them. So next time you see a feather, you can pull those apart, and you can pull them back together too. They'll hook back together like a piece of Velcro.
That is so interesting. So when I think of a bird, I'm thinking of like layers of feathers, right?
Right.
So is that how like it all kind of stays together? Like they're kind of connected to each adjacent feather via these Velcro?
No, I'm talking about a single individual feather. So you have the shaft and you have the barbs, the branches, and their little branches, which have hooks on them. That's like the Velcro. They grab onto each other.
Okay. I was just curious because they're layered. It seems like that's how they kind of stay and kind of where they're supposed to, I guess.
Yeah. And they grow out like shingles on a house and they overlap each other. And what you see is that vein part, but underneath that vein part, there's lots and lots of down. And that keeps a bird warm, but you don't see that. What you see is just that tip of the feather.
Is the down structure, is that different than the upper part of the feather?
It's different than in that it doesn't have those little hooks that hook them together. So it's all wispy.
I never thought of that. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved how you explained it. It was much more eloquent than how I was trying to get there as far as like shingles of a house, how they kind of layer on each other.
Yeah. And you can see how that would keep a bird dry. The water would run off, but they also have to keep dry in another way too. So water doesn't soak into them. And they have these little tiny, when the bird feathers growing, they have these little tiny microsculpture in the surface of the feather that are like little bumps. And when water hits them, it's kind of like when an ant falls on a puddle. It doesn't go in because of surface tension. It's the same with a feather. So you can take like a duck feather and dip it in water. It'll pop right back up. But if you hold it under, you can see a little silvery sheen, and that's air that's trapped because of the surface tension. It doesn't get to the main feather and get it wet.
Wow. That is really wild. So how long you been carving feathers? Like, and what was the catalyst for you to even explore this?
So I'm later in life. My mother dies, and I go, I want to do art for a living. I want it to be my life. And I thought, well, I can do all these things. I could do metal work, I could paint, I could do all this stuff, but I want to focus on one thing and get really good at one thing. And I want that to be what I do. And I've always liked feathers. They're fascinating, elegant. I've liked and they represent so much for us. So I said, well, I want to work with feathers. And that's what I chose to do. So I started taking photographs of them, which I love to do. And I have photography equipment in my studio, and take macro photos of feathers. And I started arranging them in different ways, but there was only so much I could do with photographs that I wanted to do with photographs. I still like making photographs, but then I started taking feathers and putting them in shadow boxes and arranging them in circles and in different ways. But I couldn't really make much meaning out of it for us. So I saw these feathers. They were from an Argus pheasants, which I'm sure I'll talk about more. My favorite bird for the patterns on its feathers. And these patterns on this one feather, it was the support. It was a covert feather, it's called. And they have these little dots on them that are about 2 millimeters big. What would that be? 1/8 of an inch big. And there was these black patterns, which are mostly dots, but then towards the tip of the feather, they started looking like little birds trying to take flight. And I went, oh, there looks like there's little birds trying to escape from this feather. That gave me the idea to do that with a feather, to have little birds escaping from the feather.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I love that too.
And now that makes a lot of sense from the work that I've been able to see, and Wes and I have experienced in person, where you have a lot of these birds like in flight and different patterns. And I love that. Have you always been fascinated by birds?
Not always. I've always been fascinated by feathers.
Okay.
But not necessarily birds. I just remember when I was 12 going to the zoo with my grandpa, and at that time they let us wander in the cages and stuff. We picked up flamingo feathers and other feathers, and I came back with a big bag of them, some of which I still have. Ever since then, I've been fascinated with feathers. As far as birds, I've always been aware of birds, but not really like in a birding sort of sense, like identifying lots of birds. But after college, I had a friend who was into it, so she got me into just getting to know birds better, really. I mean, I can go, and there's a use for looking at birds and figuring out what they are and naming them. But I don't usually do that and then go on to the next species and see how many I can get. I just like watching and seeing what they're doing, getting to know them maybe on a little deeper level.
Gotcha. That intrigues me, that it was more about the feather as a material, as opposed to, like, I'm very fascinated with birds, but I couldn't tell you, like, I might be able to name 5 different birds. I love watching them in my backyard. I feed them nonstop, and it gives me great joy. But I just figured as someone that works with this material, this feather that comes from a bird, would inherently just be really like geeking out about birds. So that's why I had to ask you that question.
Yeah.
Oh, I asked you before, you said that you decided to pivot after your mom passed and do art full time. So how long has it been since you first started carving your first feather?
It's been about 15 years.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. I look at the intricacy of what you do, and to think that this is where you're at after 15 years. I mean, This seems to me like it'd be, like an entire lifetime of like
Right.
carving feathers to get to this point. So that always amazes me when I see somebody that's take it to this extreme level, it seems like.
I think what it was it's a little bit of strategy on my part for just wanting to stick with one material and knowing that feathers, since I want to fly and I can't, and I know I share that with a lot of other people from all cultures, all ages, everyone, that the feathers and the birds are symbols of that aspiration of flight, of escape, of hope, of getting from here to where we want, for achievement. Yeah.
Yeah, and a sense of freedom. And yeah, just, from the beginning of time, we've been talking about that. I mean, Icarus and, the Greeks and everything. Yeah. I think we all do. We all have that desire, wish we could fly. It's either that or invisibility, one or the other. So,
And I work with feathers, and it's all about up and flying. And so the other thing I really like are snakes.
Oh, really?
I work with snake skins once in a while just to balance it out a little bit. I like to work with materials that are shed and the creatures are still alive, and snakes shed also. And it's also a keratin-based substance. So once in a while, I'll put a snake skin, I'll flatten a shed snake skin out with an iron and put it on the back of the mount that I'm going to put the feathers on. So I've done things like, let's see, I want to say this right. Quetzalcoatl, who's been a major god, a major figure in many cultures. I mean, way back before the Aztecs even. And it was represented by the macaw parrot and also rattlesnakes. So I did a piece with shed rattlesnake and a macaw parrot feather, carving the macaw parrot feather into Quetzalcoatl and then a snake skin on the side.
Oh, that's amazing. Working with the snake skin, is that different? I mean, obviously you probably don't need to use backing or anything, but how is that experience different than like with working with feathers?
Oh, in lots of ways, snake skins are different. They're made out of keratin, same type of material, but arranged molecularly in a different way. So, and the snake skin is shed in one piece, and a feather is shed as one feather, but birds have a lot of them.
Right.
And snake skins only have one skin. And so that sheds, I mean, we shed our own skins too, but it comes off as little tiny dust that gathers around our house that we vacuum up. But the snakes shed these skins and they come out kind of crumpled, but you could get their whole head and everything. And I'll cut them down the dorsal part of their belly and spread them out and then carefully iron them. And so they're just flat. And so I flatten them against the background, and I'll fix them against the background. But the feathers, I purposefully don't flatten against the background.
And then Todd just shared the screen with us, and we're looking at a skin of a snake. What kind of snake is this one, if you don't mind?
This one's a boa. I don't know what species of boa. And then on the right in this image is just a dragon. It's not Quetzalcoatl.
Right.
Yeah.
That is absolutely exquisite. Like, I love the contrast of the snake skin with the feathers that you carved. And I can't even imagine carving that dragon.
So the snake skin in this image is flattened against the background, but I purposely don't flatten the feathers because I want to honor their shape. I want to, throughout my work, I want to honor the birds and honor the feathers, the shape of the feathers, which are not flat. They're curved front to back, a little bit side to side, and depending on the feather, more or less. So I raise them apart from their background about half an inch on little tiny entomology pins, stainless steel pins, so that you'll see shadows with my work, which I feel like the birds or the feathers have kind of given me as I've honored them and not flattened them against the background.
Yeah, it gives it dimension, right?
Yes.
You have the play of whatever light source that you may have that is illuminating the particular piece, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's 3D, and I can call it a sculpture, which is great for shows because in art shows, often they will give sculptors a higher percentage of the sale, and that's mostly because it costs a lot to cast bronze.
Yeah.
But I fall into that sculpture category.
Nice.
I feel like there's art that doesn't really fall into a particular category, right? We always, especially when you're talking about festivals and shows and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times artwork gets miscategorized, like it gets thrown into something that it really doesn't relate to in some way. But I love the fact that you kind of turned that around, and it's like a little loophole, like, that I fall into this other realm because of what I do. And you've used it to your advantage. And I think that's brilliant.
It doesn't really fall into any category.
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen anything like what you do. And to be honest with you, so for anyone listening that lives in Colorado or the, adjacent states that have experienced the stock show and gone to the Coors Western Art Exhibit and Sale, you probably have experienced Chris's work. You probably didn't know it at the time. Maybe you weren't. I think a lot of times I've watched people walk through that gallery, and people either, if they're just doing the drive-by, they almost inevitably miss it. Like, I pay attention to that all the time. I knew about your work from the first time that I went on one of Rose Frederick's artist talks or gallery talks. And years after that, she would always highlight your work. So that's how I got tuned into it and became more in tune to what you were doing. Like, I didn't really realize what was going on at the time. And I think a lot of people, unless they stop and really spend a little bit of time with it, they don't realize that these are actually sculpted, carved pieces of art with a material that most people have never experienced or seen before. Is there anybody else doing what you do?
There's some people copying my work. Yeah. And they either give me credit or they don't.
How does that make you feel?
Well, I think I am not sure if it's out there, it's out there on the web. And I am not sure if some people even know who it is, who I am. So maybe in that way, they wouldn't give me credit. I mean, we've had a few issues that we've raised once in a while, but other people do.
And so what issues arise from doing what you do? Because not everybody's going to do it exactly or have the vision that you do. Are they like just outright copying stuff that you do, or?
I mean, I'm honored. For one, I'm honored that people copy my work and they see value in it. It just really only once it's been a copy on a very well-known cover of a book, a well-known author, and really no credit. And whether or not they really knew they were copying or who I was, I'll never know. But then on their website, there was no, it seemed like they had developed this on their own, and this concept. So that just struck me. I mean, not everybody knows to give credit, to honor who you're working with. And I think it does good for other artists to do that. It doesn't take away from your own art to give somebody else credit.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I was curious, like, what the situation was, and I could totally see how you'd be honored that somebody thought enough of the work that they started to explore it themselves. But it's nice when people give you credit, right? Like, hey, I'm doing this work, but I've been influenced, or one of my mentors or whatever it may be is Chris Maynard.
Yeah, and they have, everybody has their own aesthetic and their own experience. And mine is going to be different. So my art will always be different, no matter if 100 other people are doing this. I just keep it to the birds. I very rarely do other I'll do birds and stuff related to birds. I've only done a few with people. And I thought that was a couple of years ago. I thought that was going to be a big new part. And then I go, no, I have enough that I can say, enough meaning I can make. And so I don't need to do people.
So when you mentioned this about giving meaning to your work, and what are you trying to share? What's like the narrative or the meaning behind a lot of it? I'm sure it varies from subject to subject that you're doing, or is there a common theme that you're exploring when you're making these sculptures?
Oh, the theme varies a lot, and it might be just, I've seen these lovely birds and I want to capture this scene. So birds are a big inspiration. And so, like, for instance, I took up whitewater kayaking last year, and there's these little birds that also live in Colorado on the fast moving streams. They're called dippers. Water ouzels was another name. And they're the coolest little birds. They're a songbird, but they sit on the rocks and they'll jump into the water and go underwater and grab an aquatic insect and jump right back out. They're walking on the bottom of the stream. It's incredible little birds, and they're in this fast moving water. So as a kayaker, I was seeing these, especially some of the streams that I was going down had a lot of them. So I made a piece with these dippers and on a little waterfall, and water's going down. It's all feathers. And that had a lot of meaning for me because they're extraordinary little birds. I like seeing things in new ways. And that was something new for me. I rarely try to hit people over the head with my meaning. I love to leave it up to the viewer, but sometimes I'll have some things that really hits me hard. Also, one piece that really hit me, was meaningful to me, was something that I saw on the internet and also on the cover of Audubon magazine. Miranda Brandon had, for her art project, had taken photographs of birds hitting windows, but they weren't actually hitting the windows. But she was on a project where, these big cities have thousands of birds that hit these big windows. They're attracted to the light at night when they're flying, and especially during the migration, they hit these windows and they're all over the ground. In the morning, she was doing this project to make people aware. We're trying to get people to change what the building was like for the birds so they would see these windows. So she took these dead birds and put them against a piece of glass as if was the moment of impact, the moment of their final experience of life, just like the moment of death. Right. And it was very powerful. And she blew these photographs up really big. So I wrote to her, I said, can I kind of copy your work in my feathers? and I did that. And I made a couple pieces like that. That was one of the only ones that had really specific meaning, although a lot of the meaning is about flight and that symbolism for a lot of my pieces. But I like to let people make up their own what's important to them.
We've talked about that. Really, it's a conversation between the artist and the viewer. The meaning comes from that, what the viewer is pulling from it. So yeah, that totally that's totally credible.
I was in New York City. I went to a 5th grade class to talk about art. And we were showing them a big screen of my work. And there was one picture, and one of the children said, Oh, well, what does that mean? And there's like 20 kids. And I said, well, what does it mean to you? There's really no right answer. I got 20 different, really fun, incredible, creative answers.
Yeah, kids will say crazy stuff too, and it's really interesting because they approach it from, a lack of human experience because they're so young. So seeing something is totally, it comes from like a place of that's totally removed from what, like if Todd and I were looking at it. That's what I love about that.
Yeah. And I think they would be good art consultants as you're creating a piece.
I
Yeah.
agree. I love that perspective because, yeah, kids are so free. They're not inhibited by, what, like Wes said, what we've experienced as adults. So you've been able to explore different themes, it sounds like. And I was going to pull up a piece. This must be one of the few where you incorporated some kind of human form.
Yes, they're definitely human forms there.
This particular one, which is another creation story, this is what you're talking about, where you did a little bit of a exploration using human forms or telling a story in a different way with humans.
Yes, with humans and humor.
I love this piece. It's beautiful, man.
Some of what I think a lot about is human exceptionalism. How we gone to our schools and we see these pyramids of evolution and humans are always on top. And it's just a story we're telling ourselves. It's not really the way it really is. It's just our story. So because I want to honor the natural world, I don't think we're really that's as separate as we think. And I definitely don't think we are lesser than other creatures. So I like to play around with that. And this is a little bit of that came from that thought of mine, that perspective.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you're so right. Like so many times we think that we're at the top of the food chain, but like I've told many young people in my son's scout troop, Mother Nature is a serial killer. And, we think we live in these, in this very safe world, but out in the bigger picture, out in nature, we're just as vulnerable as anybody else.
And we're really not separate from nature. I mean, we think we are because we separate ourselves in our houses and our cities, but we really aren't any more separate than we were during our hunter-gatherer days. We just don't really know it. We don't really know the creatures. We don't know how dependent we are on them. And kind of conversely, we don't know how dependent they are on us, on our actions.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's a symbiotic relationship, right?
It's symbiotic and yeah. And again, we're not better than these other creatures. I think just that idea that we're better, that we're kind of exceptions. We're not really in nature, sets us up for being able to be really extractive and not really think about what we're doing. Yeah.
I really like this piece. I love the fact that it's called Another Creation Story, and basically people can find this on, I believe it's on your website under shadow boxes, and it's called Another Creation Story. And is that the bird that's represented at the top? Is that a specific type of bird, or is it just a generic like a chicken? Or
in my mind, it was a generic chicken.
Okay, and then. Yeah, just to explain the piece, this chicken is laying an egg, and the egg is falling, and it's transitioning into a human. And then on the bottom portion of it, there's all these people. It looks like they're dancing and I just love that whole idea. Where did that idea come from? What was there something in your mind, or did it just kind of come to you serendipitously?
What's the difference?
Yeah, well, that's true.
I don't know. I open up my mind to making little tiny sketches and drawings, and I'll just start drawing, they'll just come to me really fast, and I could fill up notebooks full of ideas, and some are not ones most aren't ones I want to pursue. So this was probably just a session I had, like maybe on an airplane even. and it came to me. I can't really specifically answer that question.
Right. No, that's fine. So that's kind of interesting. So, part of your process is sketching and coming up with ideas and, kind of exploring.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit nervous about doing it these days because I have so many ideas, and it's like people say, wow, you have quite a variety of different themes and designs, and I do, but it seems like I have way more than I'll ever do, and I want to do them all.
Right.
And I'll make a piece, not this one, but other ones. I'll make a piece, and then I'll go, I want to do that a little bit differently. So I will make series of pieces where I could use different feathers and have different arrangements of the same theme. But it all takes time to do.
Yeah.
It's lovely. It's quite the nice meditative state to be drawing and also to be carving.
Tenant wants to acknowledge our media sponsor, New Magazine. That's NUE. You can follow both the national and the Denver edition of New Magazine on Instagram. The national edition can be found at new_magazine, and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. And I want to share with you something very exciting. Check out the newly launched New Denver Gallery Guide. Look for the signage that says New Denver Gallery Guide that has a QR code. Scan it with your phone, and you have instant access to a comprehensive digital guide to Denver's finest galleries and exhibitions. Find this QR code in your favorite gallery, hotel, or coffee shop as you visit and explore Denver. Thanks for listening.
I'm Chris Maynard, and you're listening to the Tenant Podcast.
And you talked earlier that one of your favorite feathers or birds is the Argus pheasant. So, and in this one that we were talking about was carved from the Argus pheasant feathers. Talk about that. Talk about why that's your favorite bird.
The Argus pheasant it grows in Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Malaysia, and it's about the size of a peacock, maybe a tiny bit smaller. And it's a pheasant, or supposedly a type of pheasant. There's 55 species of pheasants, but it's also a bird unto itself. And it has, how peacocks have their tails which really aren't actually tail feathers. They're back feathers on a peacock. And the actual tail feathers are these thick, gray, long feathers that serve to push up all their back feathers to make the big fan. Well, the Argus does it in a different way. They have these beautiful primary feathers, which the bird has a wing, and they'll have primaries and secondaries on their wings. The primaries are the power front feathers that help them fly and turn. And the secondaries on most birds are the feathers that are maybe a little broader and help them just soar, just really do the lift. But these Argus pheasants have secondary feathers that are the longest feathers in the world for secondary feathers. They're like 30 inches long. These huge, long feathers. Yeah, there's no other bird like that. And it uses these feathers for display, and it turns its wings upside down, and these feathers go around its head like a peacock. But it's the wing feathers that do it. And they're patterned like crazy. They have these, the colors are melanistic. In other words, they're built into the structure of the into the pigment of the feather, and they're browns and kind of russet reds, some grays and whites and blacks. And they use these both for camouflage and for display. And each one of these single feathers has a series of eyes that look like eyes that go all the way up the feather. They might have, 12 eyes all the way up the feather, that each one's about as big as maybe from a dime to a quarter. So I got a little obsessive with these feathers because there were so many different kinds of patterns, not only in the male's big secondary feathers, but also in their primary feathers and in the female's feathers too. They don't use them for display so much, but beautiful patterns. I got a little obsessive. I started seeing the alphabet and the numbers in them. So I started photographing them, and I took hundreds of pictures, and I got the best ones and made them into an English alphabet and the numbers. And I made a poster out of it.
That's crazy.
So I just pulled that image up, a feather alphabet of the great Argus pheasant. So did you realize it at the time that you could see the whole alphabet?
I started seeing them one at a time. You know how when you get a new car, all of a sudden there seems like there's so many cars like it. You start noticing all of these like Toyotas or whatever. Well, that's what happened with these feathers. I just got an eye for it, and they started popping out everywhere. Oh, that's how I started.
That's crazy. I mean, I never would have thought that, but it's random patterns. I would imagine. So eventually, like you said, you start seeing those kind of elements out of it.
I did this with this melanistic colors, and I'm going, I want to have a poster where it's more colorful. So I started looking at colored feathers, and this one with the Argus pheasants is one bird. I took one parrot because it's colorful, and I started looking at its feathers, and I didn't find much. All the feathers were the same bright color. So I ended up looking at about 100 species of parrots. And then to find more, I looked at about 100 other species of birds to find these patterned colored feathers, and I didn't find very many. And I realized what I think ornithologists have always known is that colored birds don't have much in the way of patterned feathers. And I think that's because birds, they're colored, for one, because they can fly and get away from predators, unlike mice. You don't see colored mice.
Right.
And if they're going to have this color, this is my assumption, if they're going to have this color, why would they mute it with patterns?
That makes sense.
So I did make a poster, but it looks more colorful, but it's unsuccessful. And there's still a lot of these melanistic A's and B's and C's also in that poster.
Well, and for people that are listening, if you go over into the photos and print section of Chris's website, if you click on that, it'll be right there. And it's a beautiful poster. And you sell these off your website, yeah?
Yeah, I haven't done much with it, but I do sell them.
Nice. So $15 each plus shipping.
Yes.
That would make a great gift. I love that. Do you feel like you got really lucky, finding this particular bird, at the get-go and like exploring it?
Yeah. And like I said, I use only shed feathers from these Argus pheasants. And the place I get them from, well, I used to raise exotic birds just because I like their feathers. I got involved, or at least to know the exotic bird raiser community. And some of that was zoos, but mostly it's private aviaries. So I met this man from Alabama who had 7 pairs of these Argus pheasants, which is a lot. And he raised them for years. And I said, can I buy the molted feathers every year? Because they molt at a certain time of year. And so he would collect them and put them in a box and send them to me. And I'd go over them and I'd figure out how much they were worth to me. And I'd give him a fair price and send him some money every year. And I did that for like 20 years. So I probably have the most Argus pheasant feathers of anybody in the world. And then one day he called me up in tears, and some animal had gotten into his pens and killed all his birds.
Oh no,
man.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. So he raised them because he likes them, or do they lay eggs? Are they?
They laid eggs, and he raises, babies, and sometimes sells them. It's definitely none of these people who raise these birds like this is it their income. That, or it might be a little bit, but it's so unpredictable because like there's a weasel could get into the cages and kill them all. I mean, there's all these things that you lose birds all the time.
Yeah, that would be devastating.
Yeah.
What other kind of feathers do you use? And you said that you're very conscientious about how you source these, that they're all legal.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. I use feathers from birds that are not from North America generally, that have naturally shed their feathers. But if you think about it, there's a lot of parrots in North America that aren't from North America. So I use those feathers, and I'll use pheasant feathers. Most of the species of pheasants are raised in the U.S. as zoos and aviaries. And then I use turkey feathers, which are usually from someone's Thanksgiving dinner. So those birds aren't still alive for sure. But the turkeys have beautiful wide feathers, and they're also, for me, they easy to export. I don't have to get special permits for it. But 100 years ago, or a little more than 100 years ago, there was kind of like a .com boom in ladies' hats in feathers because it was the style. They put feathers and whole birds on hats, and it was a big style. And some of the feathers were worth more than gold. So you could make a lot of money if you had a shotgun and some shells and knew where these beautiful birds were, especially if they were all in one place, like egrets were all roosting in one place in Florida and in the South. So people started seeing that, or not seeing the birds that they were used to seeing and getting concerned about it. And this was happening all over the world. The birds were getting shot, and the Titanic had its most valuable cargo when it sank was feathers.
Really? Didn't know that.
Yeah, that's an interesting fact.
It was really the start of the conservation movement, and they were successful in lobbying Congress in the United States to make it illegal to kill birds for their feathers. Also, people were eating robins and other birds for food. So illegal to kill them for their feathers, illegal to have these birds, and illegal to have their parts, which means illegal to have their feathers. So that was the Migratory Bird Act. And now, that's still in effect, you can't have migratory birds from North America. And there's a few that people hunt that you can have. It's, like a lot of laws, it's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
But technically, or a strict interpretation of the law, you can't pick up a robin feather and have it in your hand, or a crow feather and have it in your hand. That even though people can legally shoot crows, I suppose you could probably, if you have a license to shoot a crow, you probably have their feathers, but you can't sell them. And yeah, so a lot of people don't know that, and a lot of people, most people I know who come see my talk and I talk about this, they go, "Oh my God, I have a little altar of feathers. What should I do?" A lot of people do, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is responsible for upholding the law, and they could technically bust you for having these feathers. But I also they have priorities. Right. Just like a cop, when it's 60 miles an hour and you're going 61, you're probably not going to get stopped. But it's good. It's good to know.
Yeah, I knew like owning, it's like illegal to own eagle feathers, and I knew there was the Migratory Bird Act, but I didn't know it was. I guess I never thought about crows and robins being part of that. I was thinking more like waterfowl and those kind of birds. That's interesting.
Yeah, and waterfowl you can hunt and have those feathers. You can't necessarily sell them all, but you can have them. And indigenous folks aren't supposed to have eagle feathers either unless they have a permit.
Gotcha.
And there's like an eagle repository, and they can apply for a permit and get feathers to use for regalia or whatever for art.
That is so interesting. So when I'm walking around my neighborhood and I see either something got a bird or I just happen to be walking by somebody's yard and I see a feather randomly laying there in the grass, there's a good chance I cannot pick that up and keep that feather, technically.
Technically, legally, yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's really interesting. Like Wes said, I had no idea. And I have, feathers sitting on my mantle at home that I've picked up on, when I'm out and about in my neighborhood walking the dog. So, okay. Well, good to know.
It's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that being said, then, so talk about how I know you kind of alluded to how you get your feathers, but so they're pretty much exotic animals or are birds from other countries?
Birds from other countries, yes.
Okay.
And then some of those birds might be endangered in those countries, and there's laws to protect those birds too. So I have to be aware of that and not use those feathers. Or yeah.
Well, you've been doing this for a while, so you know what kind of feathers you like and what are available. But you've had to do a fair amount of research, it sounds like, in order to do what you do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I do some research and talk to people and in terms of the laws. Yeah. And I think I write a blog, and the blog that's gotten the most attention is Guide to Legal and Illegal Feathers.
How do you feel about the law? Do you think it's fair? Or do you think or is it time to let that go? Or are we still like these birds are endangered, and so we shouldn't be, using or killing them or collecting their feathers?
Well, it's like a lot of laws. It doesn't take everything into account, and it's hard to administer unless it's kind of broad brush. And I want to support conservation. So I want to support the laws.
Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges of carving feathers?
So you could carve a feather and not back it, but it would pretty much fall apart. So I developed that process of backing them, which took a while, talking to like 3M and chemical engineers and stuff. So that was a challenge. Another challenge is that feathers are only a certain size and a certain shape, and they're pretty much my canvas. So it's both a challenge and a blessing to have that limit, because limits really force creativity. I have to be really creative to come up with a unity of design that's going to have meaning and convey what I want to convey. It's challenging to carve them, and I've gotten really good at it, and my assistant's gotten really good at it. But I guess the challenge is knowing the structure of the feather and becoming very familiar with the structure of the feather, so that I can make little minute adjustments when I'm carving, so I know that the structural integrity will remain. Yeah.
So what do you use to carve your feathers? Is it like an X-Acto knife?
So as I said, my father was a surgeon. He was an eye surgeon. I inherited some of his tools. So I get some of my mother's artistic part. I get my father's detail. He was very genius, detailed. He was also, in retrospect, on the spectrum, very focused. And I got his tools. I've broken most of them by now, but I use his surgery tools, and some of them were scalpels, which is my main tool, is a scalpel for cutting. So eye surgery scalpels. And then I've replaced them a few times because I keep breaking them. And I used exchangeable scalpel blades. My grandfather and great-grandfather were also doctors, and I have some of their tools, and their scalpels were like sharpen them by hand. And now we have these disposable blades, which are great, but use more resources. And some of the tools that they use in surgery they're so well engineered. They're so elegant. I use pins, as I've mentioned, for separating the feather from the background, the carved feather. So there's these tools called pin holders, and they have a jaw, and it holds the pin, and you just click in the middle, and there's a little contraption where you just put pressure on it, and then it holds it. And then you put pressure on again, and it lets go. And I'll also use entomology tools, little tiny tweezer kind of things that are very delicate, very kind of wimpy. They bend easily, so you're not going to damage something. I use those for some things. I'll use tiny little scissors that might be only just 1.5 millimeters long at the tip. I might use that.
Wow. And
wow is right.
So that brings me to my eyes.
I was just going there.
Okay. So I use magnifying glasses. And when I'll have somebody take a picture of me doing my work, I'll use my dad's old kind of steampunk magnifying glasses. But really, I use big clunkier ones usually so that I can see the work. And I'll only do like an hour, 2 hours at a time, which I think ends up strengthening my eyes rather than exhausting them, because when I get tired, or even starting to get tired, I'll stop and do something else that's long distance. I'm doing these tiny little works, and I'm doing a remodel on my barn. So right now I've been just really enjoying, I'll work those 2 hours, I'll go out and I'll tear something down and take a sledgehammer, wham, big motions. So satisfying. I also have music on a lot, and I have in my studio a dance floor, and I'll just start cutting it up and waving my arms around and doing big movements, and that helps balance my life out.
Yeah, it's something that most people wouldn't even think about, right? Because you're doing such precision work that it makes sense that you would have to like get out of that, after a couple hours or whatever, and like just do something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've even noticed like, because I'll read on my phone, and then you look up at the TV and it's all, it takes your eyes a while to adjust. Good God, we spend so much time on our phones and our devices that's can't be good for us. So it's nice to hear how you do it, like an hour, 2 hours in a max, and then you're doing something that's completely opposite, like you said, dancing around or taking a good sledgehammer to something. I think that's great. So we should heed that advice just as normal people.
Well, and it's good you're doing a podcast right now. You don't have to look at a screen.
Right.
So obviously over those 15 years of you doing this, things have evolved. You found better tools, more efficient ways to doing this. What other ways has your work evolved from when you first started doing this to where you're at now?
People tell me that my work, seeing the work, they say I've come so far and my work has evolved. I don't see that. I'm too close to it, I think. I just do what comes to me. I of course, like you say, the process is more efficient, and I slowly improve when I find something that's better material or a better way of doing something.
So I want to ask you about the backing. Is that something you can talk about, or is it a chemical that you've developed that you kind of keep close to your chest?
At this point, I want it to be somewhat proprietary because I put a lot of work into it. I'm getting, at some point, probably fairly soon, I'll want to share it more. I'll maybe want to do classes or something like that, because I do want to give it to the world. I just needed to establish my own art practice. And I'm probably holding on to it a little too long. I think I could probably start, but not today.
Not today. Not on this podcast. We're not. No, and I totally understand. I have a close friend of mine who engraves rocks for people, and he's developed some kind of chemical that he uses where he's going to engrave, and it's taken him years to develop it. And even like the monument people are trying to find out how he does it, and he's like, no, he's got the chemical makeup of his compound, locked away. And it's like you said, it takes years to develop this. So you're just not going to give it away. And I really appreciate the fact that you want to share it, but you're willing to like teach it, because I think that's important to know too, instead of just giving out the secret and it's willy nilly. I love that fact that you're to the point now that you're starting to want to share it with the world. So
yeah, and then people will take it their own direction. My direction is honoring the natural world and honoring birds.
Yeah. And then did it take you a long time to develop it without giving any secrets? Was it a long process and a lot of failures, or was it something that kind of came together fairly quickly, and then you've been just using that for a long time?
It improves as I find new materials. The glues, the technique I use for with pressure has essentially not changed. I mean, it's changed at first, but I found what works, and I haven't found anything better. And the backings have changed also, and they're more flexible. I can use different kinds of backings.
Sure. Well, thanks for sharing that. I know, like I said, I didn't want to delve too much into it, but definitely was curious about, because I'm sure if you cut a feather, it just falls apart,
Yeah, actually, a feather won't fall apart.
Oh, okay.
Because it's like Velcro.
Right.
But it'll lose its structural integrity and kind of flop around.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be careful not to separate. If I've done a few like that. If I'm using the structure of the feather, I can do it, but I don't have much versatility in how I cut.
Okay.
Without backing.
Right.
So you mentioned your routine where you'll spend an hour or two carving. Do you do multiple sessions in a day? Like one in the morning, one in the afternoon, or are you good after one session, then you're off to doing something else typically?
A lot of people are pretty structured with their time. I'm not very structured. I mean, I find it works well for me not to be very structured. I'll carve for a few hours, and I may come back to it. I may not. It depends on how quickly I need to finish it.
And maybe how you're feeling that day, right? Because if you're
how I'm feeling, what else is going on, if I need to do some framing, I usually will be doing one piece at a time. I don't jump around, and often I like to leave a piece unfinished so I have something fun to come back to the next day.
And you do all your own framing?
Yes, or I mean, we do here, my assistant and I. Yes, I mean, I order frames from a great frame shop, Web Picture Frames. They're out of Eugene, and they send me the frames. They could either send the frames that are not put together, but I like to have them put together. It costs a little more for the shipping, so they'll just have the frames. But they also cut the glass for me, which I don't use glass. I usually use museum acrylic, but I could use just regular acrylic that has UV. And then I have to put a spacer in there, because it's a shadow box. And yeah, we frame it here. I have all the framing supplies. And yeah.
Gotcha. You touched on the snakeskin as a material that you use for some of these backgrounds or incorporate in some way. Talk about some of the other materials that you like to incorporate into these pieces.
What kind of materials have I incorporated? I have not incorporated a lot. I used to have geese in my field until the coyotes got them all. But I have a bunch of their feathers, and they're usually fairly white. And I sent them off to a woman in Maine to incorporate them into paper, which I could use for a background. So I've done that. I have a nice big stack of them. And the other thing I've done is wasp paper.
Yeah, talk about that.
So this is another thing. It's not a shed material, but it's also a material that was used, and then it wasn't needed anymore because the season is over and the wasps abandoned their nests. And so I'll take a wasp nest, a big old wasp nest, and they chew up wood and they mix it with their saliva, and they come back and they add little strips of their saliva, which eventually form these big flat surfaces, which aren't really flat. They're circular or whatever to make their nests. And I'll take their nests apart and get a piece of heavy watercolor paper and get a really light gesso mix, a real light kind of glue, like really water it down, and then take a brush and put that on the watercolor paper. I mean, put the wasp nest piece that I've gotten on the watercolor paper and just lightly put the gluey film over it. And that's flattening the wasp paper. And they come in different colors depending on what the wasps are getting for their wood pulp. So sometimes they might be really there might be a really light gray and a really dark brown, and they might be that way, or they might be, the whole nest might be lighter gray.
So like what I'm looking at right here that I just pulled up?
Yes. The wasp paper, I'll flatten onto the paper, and then I'll put that onto a harder paper or I'll put the flattened wasp paper that's on the watercolor paper. I will put that on to a foam core, like an archival foam core. And there you have it. I do have an aspiration. I've done this a little bit to capture some wasps when they're just starting to make their nests, because they use the wood pulp. I wanted to put colored paper in, which is essentially made out of wood pulp, and have them do reds and blues as these little strips. And I did that a little bit, but wasn't very successful. I don't know if I ever would be, but there's also these wasps called Polistes wasps, and they make a nest that doesn't have the outer color covering. It just has these places where they put their little larvae and their little hexagonal larva nests, all put together like a bee's nest, but hanging upside down. So I did put some Polistes wasp nests. I captured them and gave them some paper, and they made these colorful little wasp nests that were different colors depending on what color paper I was giving them. So I have the red, then yellow, then blue.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I would have never thought of that.
I love how you incorporated these wasp nests into some of your pieces. I mean, it is so pretty. And I've always been intrigued by wasp nests. I mean, anybody that's ever, found one that's been, after the season, they've left or what have you, and pulled it apart, or found a piece of one that has fallen out of a tree. They are so beautiful. And so I love the fact that you had this thought of incorporating this into some of these pieces.
They put a lot of work into these nests.
Yeah, it gives you a whole other appreciation, And
then I've made work out of these wasp nests that sometimes have to do with wasps. I do my walk around the block, which is about a little bit over a mile. I was seeing these. What we have here is our Western jays, and this jay was going on this ant nest, and it was jumping down, grabbing an ant, and flying back to its perch, and then eating it, and then flying down and getting another one. These ant nests actually are like a yard high. They're these huge volcano kind of ant nests. So I came back with this idea of using wasp paper, and I wanted to find out what kind of birds eat wasps from the wasp nest. And a lot of birds eat wasps on the fly, like swallows. But I found out the jays they go out, they'll destroy a wasp nest, not a big giant one, but a little one, and eat the larva out of it. That was how I came on the idea for doing a few jays and wasps and wasp nest paper.
Which is what this particular piece, I don't see a name for it, is portraying. But you're using blue and gold macaw feathers, it looks like, for the actual carving.
Yes. I use these blue and gold macaw feathers, they have the same color as a jay does, which is why I chose them. And some feathers, like I was talking about the Argus pheasant feathers, their colors are melanistic. They're incorporated into the feather through their biological chemical process. The feathers, like these feathers, these blue feathers, and also other feathers that are shiny, have a structural color. So this not really a blue color that's in the pigment of the feather. It's the structure on the surface of the feather that reflects back blue. So these feathers, like these shiny feathers, like a peacock feather, or these blue feathers from a macaw parrot, won't fade in the sunlight, as will a pigmented feather.
That's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
and this is a great piece. Like this is these jays coming down and grabbing the wasps. I love it. It's so fantastic, Chris.
This piece is I think it's at the Paradigm Gallery in Philadelphia right now.
We talked about how, and you can see this on your Instagram and on your website, how a lot of these pieces are presented inside of a shadow box. But you also, outside of that, have done installations, correct?
Correct.
And so talk a little bit about that and what kind of installations you've done and where.
So these feathers, they're not delicate, but the way that I put them up, somebody could scrape by them and the pins would get wrecked. So that's why they're in shadow boxes. Whenever I do an installation, wherever it is, it has to be isolated from a lot of traffic, but I can also make them really big. And I could use a lot of feathers. And I've done it in museums, and I've also done it in private homes. And the last one I did was at this watchmaker, Vacheron Constantin. They're really fancy Swiss watches. And they have a flagship store in New York and like right near Tiffany's. And so they wanted me to put up something so people will come in, right? Since they're a watch manufacturing company, I designed a sundial kind of type image and made a whole bunch of carved Argus pheasant feathers. And feathers, as I said before, they only come in certain sizes, and these are the biggest of the feathers. So even these feathers, I had to use a lot of them to have this piece, which the circle is 9 feet high and the whole thing is like 20 feet high. And then in the middle, in order to have the shadows, I did these pieces coming straight out from the wall at 90 degrees of a whole bunch of different kinds of macaw tail feathers, and just stuck them into the backing.
That's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
It is.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning. Now, how often do you get asked to do something of this nature? And what percentage of the work that you do these days is like commissioned pieces, would you say?
Well, commissioned and installations are different. It's not a few a year for installations. I would like to do more. If I do it overseas, shipping these Argus pheasant feathers or most any other feather except for turkeys, is just, for me, a horrendous process. What I really need to do is hire somebody to do that for me, because it's just a lot of work for permits. Yeah, just a few a year. But what I am working toward right now, I'm just starting to gather a team together to do big pieces, big pieces. And that would not be using feathers, but I have so many designs. So still having the feather theme, but making feathers out of carbon fiber, fiberglass, metal, and making them big. Ideas like think about the meaning of feathers and putting that in airports or on buildings. So I'm talking with different people. Like I'm talking with a designer who does just incredible designs for big giant shows like the Olympics, and talking with him, and he's helping me a little bit. He suggested, well, what about having them not just static on the side of buildings, but what about making them 3-dimensional? What about making them kinetic? So I don't know where this is all going, but it's going. Just we're starting this process. I still want to carve feathers, and I want that to be my main thing. So I want to have design oversight, but everybody else does everything else. Marketing and installation and fabrication, all that.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And it sounds like, part of the evolution of, just another thing that you can do and offer. But like you said, the main thing is you want to continue to do the work that you already do, which is carving these exquisite pieces. But that sounds fascinating, right? To be able to do some kind of like public art or some kind of installation on a larger scale.
Yeah, because I sell my work, or my work is sold to people who, they put it in their homes. They tend to be fairly well off. And then people don't see it. And as an artist, I want to get my work out there. So, I have a book, which is kind of ran out of, I'm deciding whether to print it again, but that's one way I've gotten my work out there. And this is another way for a lot more people to see it.
Let's talk about that. So you wrote this book and you can still order it off your website, correct?
When your podcast comes out, there'll be a few books available. But I ran out of my fourth printing, and I was thinking of not printing again. So I didn't get ahead of myself and do more. So I'm thinking I'm going to again, but it'll take 3 months for the books to ship from China.
So talk about that process of creating a book. So you select, I imagine you selected the artwork that you wanted to present in it. And how many pages is this book?
That's about 100.
About 100 pages?
About 100. I put together a whole team. I didn't go through a kind of a canned setup. I got a woman who worked for Scholastic Books to be the book designer, but she was doing that on the side for me. And I wrote it and had several different editors, content editors and copy editors, and working with me. A lot of written words about feathers and all the guys. I want to honor the feathers. I want people to know more about the feathers. So a lot of it's about how feathers are made and how birds use them, how they grow, how they're shed, stuff like that. And then about the art. And mostly that was about meaning, like symbology. And I was thinking of going through a publisher. This is my first book. So I did it myself, which I think in turn, monetarily, it was worthwhile. Because I've sold, I've sold 3,000 copies, and all of a sudden I've just gotten these orders for more boxes of books, but I'm not. And I put it on hold because I was thinking of doing a second book, and I was also thinking of going through publishers. And I have an agent, but I don't think I'm going to go that way. I think I'm going to do it myself again, but get people to drop ship it, or get a distributor and not do as much myself. Just because I want to do other things like make big artworks.
So how did you select your book publisher, your printer?
I hired a guy that's what he is. He's a printer, but he didn't have an affiliation with a specific printer. And he was kind of my go-between between printers. I don't even remember how I found Jade Printing, but they're in China. Really good. I don't remember how I found them, but the thing that was really good about them, there was communication back and forth was really good. But now I'm looking at, I can go through them, but I'm also looking at going through Dan Chen, who is also another Coors artist, very, very talented. He was the featured artist this year, and he's doing a book, and he made his own publishing company. He's Chinese. He speaks Mandarin. So he has a printer directly that he goes to directly in China. So I'm thinking of going through him. I'll look into it at least. That's on my to-do list, is to get him the details of the book so he can give me a price.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. And this book is real. I mean, it's $55 on your website. That's a great price for a tabletop book.
Yeah, I would like to get more of my newer images out, just have a totally different book and write more. And I would write more. I have a huge resource with my blog because I write every 2 weeks, very, very consistently. And it might not be a lot, but I have so many themes to work from. And I think I would like to make it more about the meaning of feathers, the symbology this time.
I would love to read that. I love that kind of, those kind of books where we're talking about symbolism and meaning. I would love that. That would be a great hit, I think.
And this book looks fascinating to me too.
Yeah.
Feathers, form and function. I mean, and it's a hardbound book. It's a hard copy book, which, you don't see that a lot. The fact that you've printed it 4 times and you're looking at possibly maybe doing another printing. I mean, good for you. Like, I think that's extraordinary. Not a lot of people can say that. And it's a good marketing piece, right? Like you can show this, you have this thing in hand that you can hand somebody that has pictures of your work and, that you've written. Man, you got a lot of irons in the fire. Do you ever sleep?
I said at 4:00 today, because you're interviewing me at 5, at 4:00, I said, I think I need to take a little nap. So I took like a 15-minute nap, which was great.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad we talked about this book because I definitely wanted to touch on that. So it's still up in the air whether or not you're going to do another printing, but you do have a handful of copies available if people are interested.
Yeah, here, let me count. Well, I see about 10 here.
10, yeah. Ladies and gents. So if you want a copy and it's signed by you?
They're all signed, yes.
Very nice. All right. Well, great. So if you're listening and you go to Chris's website and go under books, there's a place on there where you can order a signed copy of this book.
You can find them on Amazon that people will sell. They're usually more expensive, but I took my own marketing off Amazon pretty quickly because I just didn't like Amazon very much.
Right.
Jeff Bezos doesn't need any more money, so it's better if you get all the money. Yeah, that's superb. I really want to check this out. So we talked about your book and we talked about doing installations, but I do want to touch on this story that I heard you talk about, I believe, and it's called Winky Blue. Tell the story of Winky Blue.
Okay. So one of the things about being an artist for me that's satisfying is having my work really affect people and having people say it's changed their way of seeing birds. It's made them happy. So people give me feathers a lot. But this was really special because I got a handwritten letter, along with a whole bunch of feathers from the daughter of a woman whose husband had died when she was like 76. And to keep her company, she got a parakeet, a bird, and she named it Winky Blue. And she kept every single feathers because the bird shed the feathers every year. And she picked up every single feather, the tiniest one, and kept them for another 20 years until she died, until she was 96. And so her daughter sent me these feathers with this story. So I had to make this piece.
And it's a really lovely piece. How special is that this woman took the time to send these feathers that her mom had collected all these years, and the meaning behind that. And then you took the initiative and made this really lovely piece. So did you end up, after you made the piece, did you end up sending it back to the daughter, or did you just keep it as a special piece in your collection of your work?
No, it's sold. Well, I feel a little guilty about that.
Oh no,
I wouldn't. I mean, it's so beautiful,
it is
Chris. I
beautiful.
mean, and knowing the story behind it even makes it more special and significant. But I had to ask you about that because I had heard the story and I wanted you to tell it. And it's really extraordinary. And I think it's really cool that you took all these feathers from this parakeet that kept this woman company all these years after her husband passed and made this beautiful piece out of it. It's really lovely.
That sort of thing makes me happy when I get or emails mostly these days. So I get emails said like, oh, January 1st, this woman was reevaluating her life and that was a really hard year for her. And she said she went to a show and saw my work and she felt like she ended her year on a much happier note. Just things like that. Just it makes it worthwhile being an artist. It's one of the things that makes it worthwhile being making art.
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
you never know how you're going to impact somebody with your art. And it's always nice to hear, because as an artist, you work in a bubble sometimes. So it's always nice to hear that how people are affected by it.
Yeah. And people see a feather like a kid or the first time you ever saw a feather, you're like, whoa. And then the next time you see a feather, you go, oh, that's pretty neat. And next time you see a feather, like, oh, that's a feather. And next time you don't even notice it.
Right.
So my work, I know, makes people see feathers in new ways, which is really like traveling. It's like we want to go to another country because we want to have our child's eyes. We want to see new things and see them in new ways. And art can do that for people.
I love how you explain that. And I'll tell you, when I see your work, it gives me great joy. That's what it does for me. I have such an appreciation for what you do. And, and actually I was thinking about it and it was actually making me, as I was spending time on your website and looking at your Instagram again, it makes me emotional. It does that to me. That's the power of what you do.
Sweet. Thank you.
We'll talk a little bit about business before we let off this evening. How do you go about selling most of your art? Is it sales through your website? I know you have gallery representation. Is it through galleries or social media? How does that work?
These days, I sell probably 2/3 of my work through galleries. I sell some through shows like the Coors or Southeast Wildlife Expo, which I haven't been to for a few years, but COVID has kind of put a crimp on that kind of thing. But I sell almost all of my commissions for some reason don't come through galleries. They come through just directly through me. And I'm careful with galleries because if somebody has seen my work through a gallery and then wants a commission from me and they come directly through me, I'll contact the gallery and I'll say, this person, wanted to see me. So we'll negotiate out some split. They get something at least out of it. Social media, I don't really like social media very much. So, I post every week. And that's the best place to see my newest work because I often will use that as my posts. But I don't really promote it as sales. People will ask me, well, I might even read on my Instagram a couple of weeks later that somebody wanted to buy a piece. Or I'm not very good about getting back to people on that. And I feel like I should be, but I don't want to be. So, but I do. People do ask through that, and I will do sales through that. And when people ask me, and I find them on social media, I'll say just email is the best for me. So an email is usually what I go with for my main communication.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How do you go about pricing your work? Because it's so unique and not everybody's doing it. How do you figure out what is a fair price?
Yeah, well, it would be nice to price it just by size and like the linear inch. But I have a hard time doing that because some pieces I can do in 1/10 the time as other pieces for the same size. So And I know that's true with painters too, and they have to struggle with that. But I say my price is based on size and complexity. Yeah. And I don't really like some feathers I'll pay for like $100 for a feather and stuff, but that really doesn't reflect in the price. Usually it can just be incorporated into it.
It's more about your time, right?
It's about the time.
Yeah. That makes sense. And what sizes do you typically work in?
So feathers come in different sizes. There's some little small feathers that I used to just do maybe 11 by 14, something like that. 12 by 12 would be the smallest. But now I've like the past few years, I've gone maybe 4 years. I've said, well, these small feathers are lovely. I want to do something with these small feathers. So I've been doing 5 by 7 pieces, and I call them studies because they often are studies for bigger pieces. So that's the smallest. The biggest would be maybe 7 feet or so, and often they're more compositional because the feathers are only a certain size. So if there's a big compositional piece, I might do. But there's also certain, like the Argus pheasant, again, has these big tail feathers that are like 4 feet wide. So for instance, there's a museum, the Wilding Museum in California, in Solvang. I sent them a piece just now that has 2 of those big feathers. And also just last week, I brought a piece up to the Boeing's Museum of Flight. And there's another big piece that's that big, has a bunch of little birds cut out of it, and they're all flying around or on the ground. So I would say 5 feet is a good, biggest size, although I've done them bigger. That's the shadow boxes.
Gotcha. Where does the pricing begin for an original, like a smaller piece, and what does it go up to? Just ballpark.
Yeah. This 5 by 7s, I've tried to keep something under 1,000, but they've gone up a little bit. So just over 1,000 for that. And then they could be 20,000 for a big 5-foot piece.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And, in talking with all these artists that we've talked to over the years, it only makes sense that, the price increases over time, because it's not like you just started this yesterday. You're talking 15 years of experience that goes into play when you're talking about, even a 5 by 7, a study, right?
Yeah.
That experience counts for something, and therefore the price should reflect that.
Yeah. So prices go up, every year or two.
And do you typically just base that on how sales are going, the economy, all the above?
The last increase is based on inflation.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, because your materials cost you more, and
shipping and everything.
Well, and everything that goes into running your own business, right? So
everything, and plus having to eat and have shelter, all that stuff.
Right.
Heck yeah. I mean, those are things that I think a lot of times artists don't think about, but all of that has to come into play when you're talking about pricing your work.
Yeah.
And you have other projects you want to work on, and, all that stuff comes into play. You have gallery representation, which I mentioned before. How many galleries do you represent your work?
Well, I'm very productive. It's kind of a balance. It's a balance of wanting to make totally original art, and also being of service to people who, people see my work in a gallery and they want something like it. So I might make something. It's always different, but I am productive, and I want my work to be in the studio and go out of the studio. So I have a number of galleries. I'm in a number of galleries, and kind of looking for another one or two. I'm looking for the Seattle art scene I'm only in one gallery in the Northwest, and it's my local gallery in Olympia. and people trek. The people make treks here to visit that gallery because I'm here, but I also feel like I probably should have a gallery in Seattle. So I'm been talking to a few. I mean, I've been asked by a few that I didn't really want to be in, but I was in one that was called the Stonington Gallery, but during COVID they go, okay, we're going to switch it up because they represent Native Indigenous people. I'm not Indigenous, so they kicked me out, which they needed to do that because I totally behind what they did, but now I'm not in the gallery in Seattle, but they were a good gallery for me because I just liked their work. They had wonderful work. So, and then there's no gallery that really seems like a really good fit in Seattle.
So you're on the hunt.
I'm kind of on the hunt. I have a museum curator behind me and supporting me. And,
oh, that's nice.
right, who knows the art scene in Seattle?
Excellent. It's always fascinating to me this isn't the first time we've heard this, but where artist doesn't have representation in their region per se, that they, it's somewhere else, whether it's Southwest or East Coast, West Coast or whatever. But yeah, that's interesting. Is there a certain part of the United States that really
that's a
buys your stuff?
Yeah, I would say, well, the Northwest. I mean, because I've had shows around here, like the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, that always displays some of my work. Had a really nice show there, and it's a wealthy area, and it was actually their biggest show they'd had in 10 years. I mean, as far as people coming in and the 10 years of their existence, and so yeah, I'm pretty well known around that area. And I mean, it's just a suburb of Seattle, really, a ferry ride over. But Seattle people. So around the Northwest, because that's where I am. Around the West, I'm pretty well known around the West. I mean, because it's an animal theme, and we're a little bit more connected to that, I think, here than in other places. But also the Southeast they've liked my work, and I've had a lot of connections there. I'm in 2 galleries in New York. They tend to like my work that's a little more abstract, I would say.
I can see that.
When I was first there, the gallerist I was with, I said, okay, well, I'll make some pieces with pigeons. And he goes, what do you mean? Those rats with wings? Which kind of shocked me. Anyway, I did. And I explained pigeons and feathers. He goes, oh, I see pigeons differently now. But they tend to be more abstract pieces that I sell through them. And then in Europe, I have sales in Europe too, in Paris. And in Paris, it's also more abstract. I'm in a small town on the coast, Connaught, in Belgium, and they seem to do more wildlife. Birders come in, people who appreciate the wild creatures.
Yeah, it doesn't really surprise me about New York and Paris that they would be more abstract, but it's interesting because you wouldn't think about it like they'd want abstract and then these other areas would want more nature related, but it probably totally makes sense.
Yeah. And throughout, the meaning of flight speaks to everybody.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty cool that you have such a wide range of places where you show your work. I'd say you're doing really well.
I didn't want to be just typed with wildlife, which is really where my heart is in a lot of ways. But also, I want it to be more contemporary and go be out in a bigger world where people, the meaning is important to people. Yeah.
But still being true to yourself and your voice and doing work that you care about and that you love.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes I'll make a piece. I mean, often I'll make a piece just based on the feeling of flight. Another thing that I do a lot, I told you I danced just to get it spread out. I also danced because I grew up skiing, and I think this is where I got this kinesthetic feeling in my body, which is a really big part of my inspiration. I've just figured this out, that this feeling of like this, going over a mogul, and like, just getting that little moment of that feeling of weightlessness, and then bam, you hit the ground again. So you want to do it again. So I skied a lot, and I think that's where I got this kinesthetic feeling. But now I get that same feeling when I dance, and in my studio right behind me, there's a dance floor, and I get that feeling there, and I think it transfers to my art. That feeling of movement.
So what kind of music are you dancing to?
Everything. I dance to everything. It's as long as except for a techno. I don't like techno, but everything. I might be a really slow. Well, I don't know about an aria, but like a slow waltz, or it might be. I mean, some hip hop. Some of the words, well, are I'm kind of more into the rhythm, so the words I can let kind of float. Everything. Yeah, French cafe music. Oldies.
There you go.
I love that you have a dance floor in your studio. I think you were the first artist that we've talked to in 150 some odd episodes that has their own dance floor. That's magnificent.
It's just these little 2x2 little squares that you can put down, on concrete floor or whatever.
Yeah.
Join them together and make it as big as you want. And my file drawers and my tables, they all have wheels on them, so I can roll them away and make it bigger.
Nice. Maybe that's what I need for my studio. I need a dance floor.
There you go.
You like to dance?
I don't tell my wife this, but I do like to dance. But she would kill me if I said that, and she heard that because she's like, "You never take me dancing." But I do like to dance around in my own space.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always feel like people don't want to see that.
That's how I feel too.
For me, it's not for seeing, it's for just the feeling of the connect.
Oh yeah, I love the feeling. I just don't want people to see me.
Yeah.
I'm too self-conscious. But unless it was Wes, I'd be all right with Wes.
Maybe next time we'll do a waltz.
There you go. And we'll post it on our social media.
There you go.
So does kayaking give you kind of that same feeling?
I was just thinking about that today. It doesn't that much, because I call it skiing on your butt, but you don't get airborne or anything. I mean, you can go over waterfalls and stuff, but I'm older. I don't do more than like class 4 rivers. But like turning into an eddy gives me that feeling, like really a fast turn into an eddy, or maybe going around, like just hitting kind of a pillow off a rock going down. Can give me that feeling, but not as much as dancing.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that since you mentioned kayaking and that was a new thing that you were getting into. So
yeah,
interesting. You're currently part of a group exhibition at that Wilding Museum that you mentioned previous. And that runs through September 4th of this year, a bird's eye view. How did that all come about?
Let's see. They wanted 20 pieces, and they asked for me. They said what the show was going to be, and I said, sure. And then after that show is done, the pieces that aren't sold there, it's not really a sales show, but they're selling some. It's going to a gallery in near Sun Valley in Ketchum, Idaho. It's going to Gail Severn Gallery. Then they'll have another show there. But yeah, how it came about is they found me and they asked.
And is that how it mostly happens these days? People reach out to you and say, "Hey, we're doing this show, either a solo or group exhibition," and invite you.
Often, yes.
And this work going to Sun Valley. Beyond that, do you have any other shows that you have coming up between now and the end of the year?
There's shows, but not big ones with multiple pieces. I mean, there's always the show in Jackson, which is a sales show. The Western Vision show in September. I'll always have a piece there. Yeah, I may go to the Southeast Wildlife Expo next February. I'm trying to think. There's a piece, just one piece, but big piece up at the Boeing Museum of Flight. That goes through January. the best place to see a lot of my work really is at my local gallery. It's the Childhood Zen Gallery in Olympia, and they have a big wall of my pieces up. They have a lot of them. Gerald Peters Gallery in Santa Fe always has my work up. Oh, they're just making a new room for my work, so they're just doing that right now. So yeah, there'll be a lot more pieces there.
Nice. Well, that's pretty neat.
I don't think it's really they're considering it a show. There's just Chris's room. I haven't really talked to him much about it, but I don't know how long that's going to be, if it's permanent or what.
Well, that sounds pretty spectacular.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
I think about it. Yeah,
It's always nice to have your own room.
I know, because then you can dance, right?
There
Nobody
you
else
go.
can.
Oh man, this has been so much fun, Chris.
Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I've learned a lot. So about feathers, about structure feathers, and fact that be careful what you own and don't let the cops know. So thank you for spending so much time with us. I do really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. It's fun for me too.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you for taking time. I know you're busy, and I appreciate the fact that you took a nap so that you could come on and talk with us this evening. Yeah, we say it all the time, but time is the most precious thing that we have. And I appreciate the fact that you took the time that you did this evening to talk with us, and we just absolutely love your work. So
Thank you.
again, be sure to follow Chris on his Instagram at Featherfolio, and check out his magnificent work at his website, featherfolio.com. As usual, I'll have all this and more in this week's episode notes. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.